All right, everyone, let's get started. Today, as I have just alluded to before we started the recording, we have Antonia Roybal-Mack from Roybal-Mack Law, and she is joined by Amelia Nelson. Amelia, it may not be on yet, but once she comes on, Amelia is the labor attorney in the group, and so we're here to take your legal questions, give you some legal answers. Antonia has made herself very familiar with the new relief efforts. So if you have questions about that, if you have questions about your employees or laying off your employees, things like that, I think are fair game, and please chat your questions. Eventually we'll open up mics on this, but if you have a question and don't mind chatting it, that would be helpful. If you want to raise your hand, that's also helpful. So I will get to your question as soon as I can. A couple of things I wanted to tell you guys about is that we did get this this morning from the Environment Department, where food establishments can sell their convenience items. And that's kind of like, so you got to remember, you got to keep your social distancing, so no more than 5 customers in your restaurant, but you can sell things that like toilet paper and other products and other food products. So we will have a webinar on this on Friday. It's with the Cisco folks. John Castro at Cisco talks about how to set up your takeout area with food products. So I'm real excited about that. A couple of other things that we have going on is tomorrow, our Director of Education, Tom Schutz, will be on talking about food service sanitation. I've had a lot of folks call me and say, you know, when I went to this restaurant to get takeout, the people weren't wearing gloves, they weren't wearing masks, they it didn't look like they were taking the right precautions, and I'm not going to go back again. So we want to talk about that and keep people coming to your restaurants during this time and showing them kind of that outward, we're really taking this seriously, your safety and our employees' safety. So some things that we're going to talk about is, can you require your employees to wear face masks? Can you take their temperature on a daily basis? Things like that. And we'll give you the answer to that tomorrow. On Thursday, Antonia is going to be back with the bankruptcy attorney, Erica Poindexter. And you know what I'm going to do, Antonia, is at the end of this, I'll give you a chance to talk about Erica and what you guys are going to be talking about, if that's okay with you. And then again, we have John Castro of Cisco, New Mexico, talking about turning your restaurant into a pop-up shop, providing convenience goods for your neighborhood. And then you've seen the rest of this, you know, how to find an SBA lender near you. If you don't have somebody that you know that is an SBA lender, this is a good link. And then Santa Fe adds restrictions for grocery stores, and some other things are in here. So for those of you from Santa Fe, please go to that link as well. So again, I'd like to welcome Antonia Roybal-Mack back. She is our attorney at the Restaurant Association. And Antonia, I'm gonna let you give your disclaimers, because I know that, you know, this is a phone call. Please don't take everything verbatim, and get your own help with this, or call Antonia privately if you have a question that we can't answer here or that is too dicey. So Antonia, that's not a great disclaimer. Why don't you do it? We can't hear you, Antonia.
We can't hear you. Just before Antonia goes to, this is Amelia Nelson. I'm on now.
Oh, great.
Nice to see you, Carol, and others.
Very nice to see you. We've lost Antonia.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now I
Yes.
can hear you.
Okay, good. So thank you for having us again. I'm here with my colleague, Amelia Nelson, and Amelia is not only a business professor at UNM, she's also kind of our guru when it comes to employment law and all things related thereto. So thank you. I'm glad she was able to join us today. So the disclaimer is the same as it always is, and that's that get your own independent legal advice. We are more than happy through the Restaurant Association. Each of you gets 30 minutes with myself or Amelia. So if there's something you don't want to talk about on this call, or it's something that's just more involved than the information we have at our hands today to do further research on it, we'll go ahead and do that. Our goal today is to give you the best information that we have available to us right now, but there's nuances in every single one of these programs. And if your particular question is going to deal with that nuance, we're going to go ahead and take it offline. We'll still get you, but we're just going to do it in a different venue if that's okay. So Carol, are you going to moderate questions or should I pull them here from the chat?
I'll go ahead and moderate.
Okay, go ahead.
So the first one is if you have an employee that traveled out of state by car, do they have to self-quarantine for 2 weeks when they come back?
Okay, so take that one, Amelia. Based upon the governor's ruling or her most recent executive order, I'm calling them ruling because that's what they feel like. But the executive order is that if you travel by air, but the advice I'm otherwise giving to my business clients is that go ahead and if you feel like they went to a hot zone or they're otherwise could be a problem for the rest of your business, you can certainly ask them to quarantine for 14 days.
Yes,
One of
and
the things that will come up with that is probably going to go into the FMLA discussion as well. Because if an employee is required by the employer or due to their own circumstances of being sick or otherwise, they'll be entitled to the Family First Coronavirus Response Act updates. So you want to be aware of that as well. In other words, it'll be on paid leave for the 14 days, whether they're a covered employee or not, and then partial paid leave if they actually are sick and continue needing to be out of the workplace for some amount of time, up to 14 weeks as it stands right now.
perfect, thank you. And we do have information on our website. Remember, folks, we have the poster that came out on that and
Good.
stuff. Yeah, so don't forget that that's there. So I also have Jamie Balzano. Janie is from Carlsbad. And Janie, I'm going to unmute you, and if you have a question. Janie? Do you have a question? Just tell me if you don't. All right, Janie, I'm going to mute you. And then if you still have a question, type it in if you would. When applying for the Paycheck Protection Program, I was put on a waiting list from my bank due to high volume applications. I still haven't heard back from them. I've been hearing that funds are no longer available. How true is this?
This is sadly very true. What you need to do is go, can I that?
Yeah, and you know what, Antonia, do you have your headphone on?
No, I took it off.
You know what, you're going in and out again.
Yeah.
Oh man, sorry about that. Can I ask where that person is at?
Yeah, El Pariso.
Is that local?
No,
I think it's Ruidoso.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so what we've learned, and I asked because we went through this. I had people call every single bank in my office yesterday to find out who still had available loans. And just to give you an example, New Mexico Bank and Trust opened their loan portal Friday afternoon. By Monday morning at 10 a.m., they had received $1.5 billion worth of loan requests and had already had to close the portal.
Great.
That's New Mexico Bank and Trust, a fairly small local bank. What I suggest you do is don't wait for your bank to reopen up their portal because they may not have the ability to service. So go through, big banks, Citibank has already closed their portal. So what you need to do is find a bank that is still offering loans, where I'm finding success now today, it's Tuesday, is going to be the local credit unions. Some of them do have availability to do the loans. The other one, I'm going to move my screen here so I can give you the exact name of the bank. But the other one is, I believe it's First American Bank, still has their portal open, and Rio Grande Credit Union still has their portal open. And the other one that I do know is, it's called TDK Bank. They're actually out of Durango, Colorado, but they have an office here in Albuquerque. So they still have theirs open, but it's Sunflower Bank, which is, but as of this morning, those are the places that still had their portals open. So don't wait for your bank to come back to say we're reopening. Just take that same loan application. It's the same application everywhere, and do that. For the credit unions, you're going to have to become a member. Fine, pay the $5, become a member, but that's what you'll need to do.
So thanks for that information. And the other thing is, I was on a call this morning with the National Restaurant Association, and they said that there's a chance that they will reopen and put more money into this fund. So just that's going to be like COVID-4 is going to be more like a COVID 3.5, because really all they're going to do with that is put more money into that fund.
That's what we're hearing as well.
All right, so the next one is, what is the legal difference between a layoff and a furlough?
I'll let Amelia take that.
Somebody just asked me that the other day, and I looked it up. And honestly, for purposes of, or legal purposes, they're considered the same. But one of the biggest differences that are noted is that a furlough is considered to be an alternative to layoff, and it requires the employee to work less time or fewer hours or take a certain amount of unpaid time off, whereas a layoff is viewed as a temporary separation from payroll. So let me restate that. I think there might be a better way. A furlough is not a layoff because it still has the employee working and under payroll, maybe at reduced hours, at reduced dates, something of that nature. It's signifying that the employee remains an employee and is continuing to work, but doing less work with, or fewer hours of work in their weekly, I guess, segment. Whereas a layoff is an actual separation from employment, but it's different from a termination because it's viewed as a temporary separation from payroll. We frequently see them when there's not enough work for somebody to do, or that there's something that's occurred in the environment, and I don't mean like actual environment, but the landscape of that particular industry that's limiting the need for the work, but doing so in a temporary way. You'll see layoffs obviously in like seasonal type of jobs, of course. And a furlough, you don't normally see in that type of same scenario because the furlough is legitimately a reduction of hours. And I think it's different than even changing somebody from a full-time status to a part-time status, because it's viewed as a temporary change in the hours worked instead of a permanent designation of the individual from a full-time employee to a part-time employee, for example.
So I'm going to ask a follow-on question to that. Can a person who is furloughed or has less hours get unemployment?
Yes.
I believe so.
I talked to Bill specifically about that last week, Carol, and he said they're treating all of, reduction in force, hours down to 0, all of those are being treated as eligible for unemployment.
So, and Bill is the Secretary of Workforce Solutions.
Correct, yes.
He is the one to give that answer. Okay. This is a question. I have an application number for an EIDL advance and loan, but have not received an email. I applied Thursday. How can I check the status?
The only way to check the status on that is call the SBA 1-800 number. I'm on Carol's screen. Give me just a second. I will have that posted before this webinar's over. but there is no place to go in and check your status. Just to give you some thoughts, I actually don't know anybody yet who's received the EIDL loan. What I learned from a banking webinar that I was on earlier today is they still don't actually have the mechanism to fund those. So, but the 1-800 number is the best way to check on that. And I'll get that number. If you don't have it handy, Carol, I'll have it posted before the end of the call.
Okay, and I can possibly look it up here. So the other thing is that John Garcia from the SBA did give us his number, and I'll text it in the chat. I don't know that he's going to have that answer, though. I think it's probably better to call 1-800 number.
And he did, Carol, you were on the one with the economic development. That's where they said, that's where he had said the best place to go is the 1-800 number.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Does a restaurant need anything special to start delivery, or should they use a service like Grubhub? What liability does the restaurant have to implement delivery on their own?
Okay, so there's two separate things to think about, and Amelia, I'll have you chime in if you think of anything additional. The first is, if your employee is injured in a car accident, I believe, will your workers' compensation insurance cover that? And that's something Carol can chime in on based on conversations she had. The second thing you need to look at is insurance coverage, and make sure that you have some sort of insurance policy that covers driving. The third thing you need to do is make sure that your drivers, those people that are going to be out on the road and that this policy is going to be covering, make sure they have a valid driver's license. So even if you took their driver's license at the time that you hired them as part of the hiring process, get an updated valid driver's license. And, if they have DWIs, they have other sort of, not other, DWI, that's if they have DWIs, I wouldn't let them drive. So those are the sort of things you want to look at. But the most important thing you can do is get a check with your insurance. And this is going to be both your workers' comp as well as your liability insurance. So Amelia, anything else to add?
As I think about it, I think you covered it all pretty well. There can be a lot of, and I'll just say this as a point of clarification and just addition. There's a lot of different scenarios that come up when you're dealing with delivery services by a restaurant that's focused on food preparation and service, but not necessarily delivery. So to be candid, a background check, and as Antonia stated, even if when that individual came in and began working for you, you obtained the driver's license and other identifying documents, a background check to confirm the employee that you're intending will drive and deliver, history, including criminal history, is going to be really crucial. These are individuals not only driving, but also making contact one-on-one at an individual's home. And there are plenty of cases out there where we find significant liability, not only in the potential of an accident between the restaurant source and the delivery source, but also the interaction that somebody has with the individual they're actually delivering to. In addition to all of that, I think it's crucial right now to contemplate how it is that the food is going to be handled between the restaurant location and then the delivery point, ensuring that gloves and masks and other precautions are used. I can't imagine how it would be demonstrated, but one of the things I was just having a conversation about was whether or not somebody could be liable, or Grubhub, DoorDash, or a restaurant could be liable if in fact the individual was asymptomatic yet carried the coronavirus, and that there was some way to prove it was disseminated between the delivery and the recipient receiving the food. Seems a little far-fetched, but I think it's worth it. I'd also check with the OSHA provisions regarding delivery and food safety and workplace safety, to ensure that the vehicles that are used to do delivery are safe and mechanically updated. And that kind of goes to the insurance as well, as Antonia mentioned. Other than that, nothing else is standing out.
So the only thing I know is that FISIF, our Food Industry Self-Insurance Fund, has waived their usual, they don't usually like to insure restaurants that have delivery, but in this case they will. So if you have FISIF, that's something that I had an early discussion with them about, and they are waiving that. So, so thank you for those answers. That's very helpful. And I had another question from Tom, and he wants to unmute himself. So Tom, can you do that? And I'm Tom Hutchinson.
Sorry, Carol. I was
Okay.
my thumbs were my fingers were acting like thumbs. Hey, to the discussion regarding whether there'll be funds added to the 350 billion. I watched a press conference today. It appears that the administration is working with Congress to add 250 billion to be available by Friday. So we'll see if that happens. This is a question. Some of us are starting to transition into another moment. I was fortunate enough to get my PPP loan approved yesterday, and so to our councils on the phone, I've been trying to get a straight answer on this. If we offer our laid off employees employment, are they required to accept it?
Okay, so this was kind of the question last week that we went through over and over, and the short answer is no.
Yeah.
But when on the banking webinar that I was on today, what you need to do is what they're looking at. One of the things they're looking at is headcount. So what you might do is get other people who you could hire to get your headcount and your payroll back up to that level, up to the amount for the loan forgiveness. Now, keep in mind, if you don't get loan forgiveness, you can always just take the PPP money and, give it back, pay it back to, if you don't use it for payroll. But since they're looking at headcount and the amount you'll need to pay back, your employees don't have to come back. One piece of advice I am telling people though, is to make it clear, in writing, that you offered your employee their position back, because they don't have to go look for work, but this is basically a new job. One of the things we're looking at, it'd be a new job in a sense for them. So I think that that's something that might come into play a little later on with Workforce Solutions. But when I had this conversation last week, the long and short of it is no, they don't have to come back.
Okay, so the definition you shared with us earlier about a layoff employee that's temporarily separating from payroll, and I'm offering that position back, that doesn't seem to line up right.
So it doesn't entirely, and it's because when I spoke with Secretary McCamley, I'll call him that instead of Bill. When I spoke with him, he said that Workforce Solutions is treating furlough, layoff, reduction in hours all as the same sort of thing. So I'm kind of talking more from the Workforce Solution standpoint. That's where my answer is coming from.
Okay.
Are we still trying to get some, what do I want to say, something written saying that from the department?
Yes, the likelihood of getting something written within the next 14 days, though, because we have to do it via IPRA, is pretty small.
Yeah.
Can I quick follow up?
Yeah,
sure.
Carol. So based on that answer, Antonio, thank you very much for it. And I've skipped down, looked at a couple other questions on chat. So I'm going to describe my scenario real quick. I've got 48 folks that are officially filed for unemployment, either full-time or part-time hours. And then I have 26 that did not file for whatever reason. And I currently have 14 employed in my takeout operation. So as you know, this PPP loan was in effect or put in place for us to hire all our people back, even though we've been mandated to shut down. Now there's an oxymoron. So if I can't hire my people back, which is the intention of this law, because of a very generous is not probably the right word, a very aggressive enhanced unemployment deal, this thing is all upside down. And so to your point early, give back the PPP loan. Well, Yeah, I guess I can, but that wasn't it designed to help small business make payroll, and regardless of regardless of whether we can have work for these people, at least they'd be on my payroll at home versus collecting unemployment at home. That's the dilemma, and I don't know if there's an answer. If you guys can help me think through this.
What we, I can, I'll defer to Amelia next, but I've had this conversation with Workforce Solutions. I've had this conversation with, many different employers, and the kind of two pain points between the two is absolutely the issue. And there's guidance right now to say if an employee does not come back, they forfeit unemployment. Now, when I've done some brainstorming on this, and Carol can chime in, I look at it as if you offer them the job, it's a new job, and if they don't take it, then that gives you some basically, if they still continue to collect unemployment, it would be considered fraud because they have been offered employment and they're not trying to become employed. So there is no guidance right now. There's no rules on this. I expect to get something, but it's going to be a couple weeks out. So the best advice I can give you is offer them all their jobs back in writing.
And the other thing I would say is be sure and get into your unemployment account and make sure that they know that those people have been offered their jobs. The other thing is that the $600 is not in their hands right now, and they don't actually know when they're going to get that to them. So I think we may be thinking too much into this about that 600 additional dollars weekly. I think they've been promised it, but nobody really trusts the government.
Well, Carol, my thought there, and I'm going to take Antonio's advice. This is where we were going to go. We were going to offer everybody back their job. In fact, we were going to offer for those that, we're kind of getting in that tough period of time where they haven't had a paycheck in a week. The $600, which has been promised, hadn't shown up. The $1,200 hadn't shown up. So things are starting to get a little tight out there. And so my thinking is, as I offered all my staff back, I would go so far as to offer some advanced pay right away, give them relief right away, because I'll have already been funded by PPP to do that. And that might be an enticement to get them off unemployment.
Can I chime in?
Yes.
This is Julia. So I'm not really sure, and I was thinking about this, and I have to tell you, caveat, I'm not positive whether or not what I'm about to say is correct, but the FFCRA, which is that Family First Coronavirus Response Act, has in it the requirement that an employer provide an employee of paid sick leave, and this is for all employees for 2 weeks at full pay, and then another 2 weeks at 2/3 pay, and then for covered employees, and the difference is whether or not the employee has been with the employer for more than 30 days. So all employees is somebody under 30 days. Covered employees then have an additional an additional 10 weeks of paid leave at 2/3 of the regular rate. Okay, so I know that we're not talking about family medical leave at the moment, but the qualifying reasons for leave under what is titled the FFCRA includes within it when an employee is gone from employment because the employer was subject to some type federal, state, or local quarantine or isolation order. So if the reason your employees are not working right now is because you cannot carry on business and they have to be isolated due to a quarantine or isolation order, it appears that the FFCRA requires that that employee be on paid leave for up to 80 hours at full pay for 2 weeks, and then another 2 weeks at a minimum of 2/3 pay if there's continued, leave from work because of the quarantine or isolation. So I'm not saying for sure that the reason your employees aren't working right now is because of quarantine or isolation mandates by one of the government entities, but if they are, then we've already got guidance from this Families First Coronavirus Response Act from the Department of Labor stating that they should be receiving paid leave as it is right now.
So
Oh, but
and here's the situation for most of my members. That didn't start until April 1st, and they've laid off their employees prior to that. So,
And of course it is, you know, inception of April 1st when it came into play. I'm not saying anybody's in violation. I'm saying if there's a question as to whether or not employees who are not working should be receiving paid leave, there's a sick paid leave requirement under the FFCRA that began on April 1st. And it's, again, there's different categories of the reasons why people would be gone and how much they're paid depending on whether they're covered or not. But it might be worthy to consider that as well.
so are you saying that they could take advantage of the FFCRA in the meantime? Because, but remembering that
No.
is paid on the back end through a tax credit.
Right.
I
So
don't think, I mean,
this is regulatory movement from our Department of Labor telling employers that they must do something. So I don't know whether I would call it taking advantage of it, but what I'm hearing is somewhat of, hey, you know, I'd like to be able to pay these individuals who aren't working because they need the money and they've been out for a week or something more already. Well, important to note is as of April 1st, if they're out because of, and again, there's 6 delineated reasons. The one I'm referring to is where it says they're out on leave because the employee is subject to a federal, state, or local quarantine or isolation order, then there appears to be some mandate that they be paid. I am not, however, saying that the reason that they're not working right now necessarily is because they are subject to the federal, state, or local quarantine or isolation order. But if they are, then there's a requirement that they be paid up to 40 hours a week at the base rate.
Well, and the only way that's going to work, if that's correct, because no one has monies to do that unless we have a PPP loan in place to offset those payroll payments. If we were to institute what you're talking about right now, we'd all be bankrupt within a couple weeks. We simply don't have revenue to support any kind of paid sick leave or leave requirement, even though it could end up in the form of a credit later on. You all understand that? There is no revenue to come in. We've got to figure a way to use the PPP funds to bring folks back on payroll versus any other source, because there isn't any.
Yeah.
Right. And to get to just the specifics on that, so we can definitely get to some of the other questions on that, the way I read so it's called the interim final rule. That's what we're working off of right now for the PPP. And that was put out by the SBA. And this is, actually what we're looking at. One of the things they're looking at is headcount and dollars. So even if you can't get back your same employees, the way I read it, you can get other people if you wanted to rebuild your workforce. And the truth is you might need to get other people. So it's not a bad idea to get whoever you're going to need to start training and those sort of things in mind. So let
me just say this and I'll shut up. That's not the intention of PPP. The intention of PPP is to reemploy folks that we laid off. And we're having to dance around all this right now because of the unemployment enhancement. And that's really unfortunate. I don't need to be going out looking for other employees, Antonio. I want to just offer the folks back that have been dedicated and loyal to me for many, many years. Regrettably, they're conflicted because they're getting a better paycheck sitting at home. That's the dilemma we have.
Right. And there's nothing we can do to get around that right now.
Okay. Thank you very much for your patience.
No problem.
Thanks, Tom. And there's a problem that no one's taking a PPP loan if you didn't have an account with them before the loan opened. So I get that. If you applied with the lender on Monday morning but have not heard anything, should you try to apply with another lender? I was told that there's no way to check. I called the SBA and they stated that they could not track the idle loan application. So this is Oh, okay, so there's no way to track an idle loan. This is from one of our, I think this is from Cindy in our office. We are applying for an idle loan. And
Not me.
okay, it says accounting, so if accounting wants to get on and explain this, I'd appreciate it. In the meantime, Sylvia has a question. The PPP loan claims that you have 8 weeks to correctly spend the money from the date of origination of the loan. Is that term defined as in, does that mean once the money hits your bank, or it doesn't make sense to rehire everyone back with a closed restaurant unless the government just wants to pay my employees to stay home? And then, and then they pay your employees to stay home for 2 months. And then if this goes on, now you've got to lay off your employees again. So, yeah, there's a big problem here in timing. There's a big problem in the disincentive. The National Restaurant Association is well aware of these problems and is trying to get some relief in this next COVID bill, if that's what they do. I think another huge problem is that people with perfectly good businesses right now are claiming these loans and getting these loans and paying their employees when they don't have any, they're not suffering in any way. So I think that's huge. And it says Sunflower Bank is at capacity with their loans at this time. So remember, folks, that we have talked about this idle loan to get you the $10,000 up front. I believe there's still money there. I have no idea. Number one. Number two, there's also the ERTC that we talked about for a little bit yesterday. Do you, Antonia or Amelia, do you guys know anything about the ERTC, which is a tax credit that allows you to get back half, at least 50% of your payroll?
I'll take a stab. This is Amelia, and my stab is very short. Other than what you've just stated, I don't think there's a lot of additional guidance on how the tax credit is going to work, notwithstanding that there need to be obviously records kept and information available from the employer to the essentially IRS, state, federal, really it'll be federal, to provide the basis by which this credit can be produced. But I think it's something that's going to happen obviously way down the road and doesn't automatically influence or provide relief for the employer simply because of the tax credit. My information though is pretty limited and it's not an area that I specialize in. Antonia, what do you know?
So let me tell you, I haven't seen new guidance put out on that in the last couple of days, Carol. So I know the old EITC by the SBA, it's a tax credit. So you're not going to get it until you do your taxes. And it's credit presuming you made money. So I don't really see this as a viable way to really help anybody right now. If there's any CPAs on the line that can give more feedback on that, but I haven't seen anything new on this.
Well, and this is that tax credit at the end of, gosh, I guess it's now the next quarter. So we've got to wait for May, I believe, before we can even look at collecting at the end of May. So it's for somebody who may have kept on just a few of your employees and you have enough runway that you can do that. But anyway, I'm just trying to give you hope here.
Could I just, this is
Yeah.
Sylvia. I was the one asking about the 8-week period from the date of origination.
Yeah.
I know you read my question and I just didn't hear anything. I was advised by essentially a woman that oversees many Hilton hotels. And apparently what her company is trying to do is see whether essentially if the 8-week period from the date of origination from the loan is not clearly defined, then what this hotel company plans to do is, for example, say they plan to open June 1st, so they would hire everyone back. So even though they applied for the loan this weekend, they're proclaiming the date of origination of the loan as a date that they're defining, such as May 15th. That way they hire everyone back May 15th and then have 8 weeks, and they plan on being open June 1st, and count that as the 8 weeks to hire everyone back at a time when it makes sense. I don't know if that question makes sense.
It does. It absolutely does. And I've had this a lot is can we start this when we want, right? So I don't want to bring people back right now because I don't know if this is going to be over by then.
Right.
I think the intent of this, and from what I've heard, this is one of those things that we're asking for clarification from the National Restaurant Association, so that people can start these loans later. And there's an end date to these loans too. The PPP loan, there's an end date that you can claim this.
June 30th.
June 30th. Okay, so you have to start it prior to that. And so that's kind of what you're saying is, can I start it when I want to start it? Right now, it says the origination date, so no, but I don't believe that's the intent. We're asking for clarification on that. That's all I
Understood.
can
Thank
tell
you.
Yeah. And as soon as we know, I know this is on everybody's mind, so as soon as we know, we will let you know.
And Carol, what the rule actually says on that is it says the lender must make the decision on forgiveness within 60 days. So that's right within that 8 weeks. So that means that if you wait till July 1 to ask your lender to make a decision on loan forgiveness, it's too late. You have only that 60-day window. When I was on the banking webinar earlier today, the bankers were pretty clear that that you cannot do that, the goal is to keep people on payroll. So they're going to start that date on that origination date.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, nobody really knows but I would take that to the bank just because it's the bankers that are going to make that decision. So I think that you need to go with that right now because that's what they are being told. And we don't have, again, we're asking for clarification. We don't have that. The bankers have what they think is clear, and they're the ones who are going to be making these loans. So I think you can go with that. Once you get the loan, you have to spend the money. Is that basically it? What you believe, Antonia?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's what the rule says. It says they have 60 days.
Carol, this is Suzette. I wanted to just clarify my question was that if you applied for the PPP like a week ago and you haven't heard anything, do you think you should reapply with another lender if you can?
I would call the lender because the lender would know, even though the SBA can't track PPP, the lender knows what their process is. The other thing is depending when you applied, because they didn't actually have the full applications and everything ready until Friday. That's when I know the application was out sooner, but I think they had their portals open as of Friday. So I would check back with the bank first. And then if they can't tell you or don't know, then I kind of look at this as a race, and whichever bank can tell me yes the fastest is the bank I'm going to go with.
Yeah, I tried to talk to the bank and they referred me to the SBA. And so when I spoke to the SBA, they obviously couldn't answer any of those questions. They referred me back to the bank. But the interesting thing was when I talked to the SBA, I did ask them about the EIDL loans, and they did tell me that there was no way that they could track those at all today. That was today.
Wow.
So I have a question here. Are employees that worked less than part-time or where they only were employed for a short time prior to the temporary layoff, will they still be able to claim unemployment? I have an employee who was denied based on not having earned sufficient wages.
So I think when the state finally gets the entire CARES Act, I guess, in line with their systems, I think those people will be eligible for unemployment. But until they get that up and running, and who knows when that'll be. I think they're still using the old system, which basically says if you don't have enough quarters, certainly self-employed people, as of when I checked yesterday, still couldn't apply. There was, so I think that'll change, but we're just not there yet.
Right, I agree. But yes, they should, according to every bit of guidance and information received, part-time employees or even employees that were employed for a limited amount of time with these emergency changes should be entitled to these different benefits, including unemployment benefits. It's just, they haven't caught up yet.
Yeah, well, they have had an amazing amount of applicants to that.
Yes.
So,
I don't know why that individual was denied though. Maybe she should, or he should reapply again.
Yeah. So can someone explain what an EIDL loan is? EIDL is Economic Injury Disaster Loan. And this piece here just that's up on my screen talks about the emergency advance. So with this loan, which you can get a significant amount of money, much more than the $10,000, you get an advance of $10,000 that you don't have to pay back. So this is a true loan though. This isn't a small business loan that I believe you don't have to start paying for 12 months. And it's a low interest loan, but it is a loan that has to be paid back. It's not like the paycheck protection loan that has forgiveness. This does not have forgiveness except for that $10,000 emergency advance. Any other questions, or Antonia, do you have anything else on that? Okay.
While you're on that, Patrick's got a question down there that says, will the EIDL loans have fees and personal guarantees associated with them?
I don't remember. I don't think they do.
Let me look at that rule, and if we want to move to another question, I'll have that answer shortly.
Will the PPP be able to be reimbursed a line of credit which was used to pay payroll because of coronavirus? Oh, so would you be able to be reimbursed for a line of credit that was used to pay payroll through the PPP loan? That's a good question.
That is a really good question. So if I look at the regulations, and this would definitely be a good question to check with your banker, but what the banks are going to be asking for when this is all over in that 60-day period to look at loan forgiveness, they're going to be asking for your 941s, and they're going to be asking for your payroll records. So I don't think they're going to care. They're not going to, I don't think they're going to look at the ins and outs of the loan specifically from what I understand, but they're going to look at your 941s and your payroll records to make sure that you made that payroll and that your payroll was at that same level.
And we did talk to one of our accountants last week about this, and so I will make sure that you guys, I'll look at that. But the EIDL loans, I believe there are no fees, and the personal guarantees, you don't have to have a personal guarantee. So that's the other good thing about an EIDL loan. Let me see if I can get.
Yeah, you're correct. On the rule for the EIDL loan, there is not a personal guarantee.
Okay.
On the application, it did require personal information to apply for it, just so you know.
And that's up to $200,000. So if your loan is under $200,000, you can be approved without a personal guarantee. If it's over $200,000, they may ask for a personal guarantee.
So to say, Sagar, in an earlier call, you mentioned you're talking with New Mexico Workforce Solutions about reconsidering the waiver of having to look for a job. So we still don't want our employees to have to look for a job because not everybody's getting the PPP loan right now. So there's that. And then second to this is that we just want them, if they get if you offer them a job, then we want them to have to take it. I think those are two separate things. We have not got clarification from Workforce Solutions. I think we need to go to their legal group and get clarification. But that means stepping around the secretary, who I went to in the first place. So I'm having a hard time maneuvering this. But for right now, you still have the waiver of having to look for a job. So your employees do not have to look for a job while they're on unemployment. But they also don't have to accept a job while they're on unemployment. So that's kind of a catch-22. Did we get this one about being able to reimburse a line of credit?
Yeah, I think we answered that to the best of our knowledge right now, and that's what documentation the banks are going to need to look at the loan forgiveness.
Okay, so this person has employees asking if they're on unemployment and then come back on board with the company if she gets the PPP loan. And if the company can't start up again, can they go back on unemployment?
I think the short answer to that is yes.
Yeah, me too. Of course, I assume many things, even if they would have not been acceptable previously, are going to be, at least in an interim fashion, acceptable right now. Yeah. And for the indefinite future as we address this coronavirus.
So, folks, if you have any other questions, if you would like to unmute yourself and ask them, it's always interesting. We don't have any more chat questions unless I skip something. If my staff is watching me, please let me know if I skip something. And seeing no more questions.
I have one more question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So on the first page of the PPP application, it literally just says jobs, semicolon, asking how many jobs we employ, I assume. Do we have clarification whether that's FTE full-time equivalent jobs, whether that's just full-time jobs or all jobs across the board, or is there no clarification at this point? And is it just a question to see that we're less than 500 employees?
It's to see that you're less than 500 employees, because they're not differentiating from the bank standpoint between FTEs and part-timers.
Awesome, thank you.
So the other thing I want you guys to know is that we had one of our members who has already applied and received the PPP loan. He sent us a worksheet. It's here on our page for how to calculate. I don't want to save this. I want to open it. Wait, it's coming. So anyway, I wanted you guys to see that, because this just will take some of the guesswork out of the calculations that you have to do. That does not have to do with that last question. The last question was about how many overall employees you have. And this really is about how to calculate some of the things that you're looking at. So just want you to know that that worksheet is on our website as well. Any more questions? Marina?
Unmute. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
You can. Okay, excellent. So I think I had asked this question before, and I again went to the bank. I went to Sunflower Bank. Somebody's mentioning they stopped. I went today. I dropped off my application. I reconfirmed with the banker that I'm talking to that they needed absolutely no documentation from me because they're my bank normally, and he said that they had everything they needed, at least preliminarily. But they have no clarification on any questions that you ask. He has Carol might as well run the bank right now because you have like tons more information than they do. So I've asked this, and this is the sticking point, because there's so many issues again with getting employees back and the time frame for using this money. I just want to clarify. I know for a fact, I'm this week, unfortunately, I'm having to let go of the last handful of employees that I had, which are my salaried, most expensive employees that I was trying to protect, and it just is not plausible where I'm at. And I'm trying to reassure them and answer any questions that they have, but they will come back whenever I would like them to. They are the core people that cost me the most to run this company, but they will come back the minute that I tell them I've got this money, come back on board. The other gray area of employees are the ones that are part-time employees, and it's up to about 40 employees, including seasonal workers with banquets, et cetera. If I only was able to get my core group back, which is my salaried employees, and again, a couple of other key hourly employees, and I get the whole entire loan that I asked for, but I only use a portion of it on payroll. And again, the numbers are not going to look the same as when we started here. So let's say I turned in the number of 44 because that's what the banker said, to turn in the minimum amount of employees that I paid. That's what they told me to do. I don't think that's correct. I have to look at the worksheet you're talking about, but that's what I turned in for now. And then I turned in an amount. If 44 turns into 10 full-time employees, and I've used that money to pay those 10 people, is that the portion that will get forgiven regardless of how many people I got back on board?
Yes.
Go ahead, Carol.
Don't you think that's correct?
That it'll be pro rata. So if you had 40 employees and 10 come back, then 25% of your PPP is forgiven, because it's not a full. It's based on, the whole goal is to keep everybody employed and everybody whole. So based on the way I read that rule, it would be pro rata. What I will do for you though is that's one of the questions that we could take a deeper dive on to figure out, from 44 to figure out not refund, I'm sorry, but the forgiveness.
So if I spent, again, just to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying, if I got a $100,000 loan and I use half of that, I use 50,000 of it paying payroll for 22 people, I'm just using numbers to try to make it easy, then I'm not necessarily going to get 50,000 of it written off. I might get less of that written off.
Correct. And
correct?
The way the rule reads, it says pro rata. So let me figure out what specifically that would mean in these sort of situations.
Yeah, because then it's already telling me the banker told me the wrong thing to put in the application, because 44 is, again, my banquet kids that they're all high school kids. They didn't even bother to ask for unemployment because they all live at home. That's like 10 of them is not even true part-time. They work once a month or once every couple of weeks, et cetera. But of that, there's still, most of my restaurant employees are part-time as well. My servers, my bartenders, those are all the people on unemployment. Those are part-time as well. So I'm obviously I put a number that's not an accurate number.
Let me tell you exactly what the rule says. It says the banker needs to confirm receipt of information demonstrating that the borrower had employees for whom the borrower paid salaries and payroll taxes on or around February 15th, 2020. Then it says they need to confirm the dollar amount of average monthly payroll costs for the preceding calendar year by reviewing the payroll documentation submitted with the borrower's application. So under the rule, what it's telling, this is what the part I'm reading is what do lenders have to do in terms of loan underwriting. So I think you are correct to put the 44 employees in there because it's asking for that. I'm sure at February 15th, that's what you had.
Okay, so that's the right number, but again, it's going to affect me if I don't bring back 44 employees, even though of those 44 employees, there's quite a few not on unemployment, because again, it was they're high school kids, so it was just extra money to have, but it's still going to affect me. That that number and not bringing back the full amount of people.
The way I read this, it does say pro rata, so I would say yes right now. But if you don't mind sending this via to an email to Carol, she'll get it to me, and I'll take that deeper dive on how they're going to apply this pro rata rule.
Okay. Okay, that makes me feel worse, but thank you. At least I got a decent answer before I've gotten, no, not a problem. It's all going to get taken care of. So at least I have a better heads up. Thank you so much.
Let me tell you one thing about this, though. Under the loan underwriting for the loan forgiveness, the banks have such a low bar. So if your bank is saying, I got your back, it's basically saying, I'll give you the exact wording because I don't want to mess it up. Give me just 1 second. So if your bank is saying it's fine, it's saying, can lenders rely on borrower documentation for loan forgiveness? And the answer is yes. The lender does not need to conduct any verification if the borrower submits documentation supporting its request for loan forgiveness and attests that it has accurately verified the payments for eligible costs. So, and the administrator will hold harmless any lender that relies on such borrower documentations and attestation from the borrower. So if your bank is saying this is how they're going to do it, I mean, they probably read this and it's very, very open. That's basically saying the bank can decide.
So the bank can say, you got, I mean, again, the monetary number is going to be larger than the amount of people coming back, but it's because there's so many part-time employees. And I think that's my concern. Okay,
but remember, some of those kids that aren't on unemployment may be happy to come back and get back on your payroll.
Then you say, oh, I'm going to just pay you as if you worked one banquet a month or something like that. I mean, one banquet a week,
well, I think
because that's basically what they were.
Yeah, you have to go back to their pay averages and give them what they have, but you want all of those people to come back, right?
Well, that is the thought that you're just, like somebody said earlier, you're paying them to stay home just like they're being paid to stay home right now on unemployment, but on your dime, it helps the whole process get going again.
Right.
Okay.
But the other piece is that some of those people are not on unemployment. So they're going to be happy if you're paying them to sit at home and they're not on unemployment. And a lot of them haven't got their unemployment yet. And again, that $600 hasn't come through. So that's just a promise from the government. So let's.
Is there a time frame for that $600? I mean, I know they're dragging it along, but are they at least even making an attempt to say, oh, it might be at the end of April or?
Antonia, do you have that?
Bill McCamley, Secretary McCamley, has specifically said openly, on Facebook and everywhere else, he has said, I don't want to promise a timeline because I can't deliver a timeline.
Yeah, they haven't figured it
no
out.
Timeline.
I want to answer this question for El Paraiso. You asked about what does it mean, 2.5% plus the idle net of the advance. So that's if you applied for an idle loan and you got the advance. Is this correct, Antonia?
Yeah, and I actually don't know anybody who's gotten advances yet. So that there's, let me go to one, let me tell you how that works. So we have a few scenarios that we've mapped out.
So again, you would take your monthly average payroll and put it in here and then multiply it by 2.5% plus any idle loan that you have gotten.
Yes, you'd add the 10,000 back there.
And then you would add the 10,000 back and then put your number of employees in here. If you don't have an idle loan and you haven't got the advance, you don't have to put anything in here.
Correct.
Oh wait, except the times 2.5%. So the average monthly payroll times the 2.5% and your number of employees.
Carol, is that 2.5% or 2.5?
Sorry, it's 2.5 months. So it's your average month. So it's 2.5 months basically. My banker informed me that the prorate after the 75% of total loan guidance was met. Patrick, can you get on and tell us what you mean about that? Patrick, are you still here?
Hi, yes, Carol, can you hear
Yes.
me?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here. So my banker said that that number of employees was definitely FTEs. And yes, it does say that you're less than 500 people, but it's also the number of hours you have to meet to get full forgiveness. And then you get a pro rata reduction for less employees. But before you get to that point, you get no forgiveness until you've met that 75% of the total loan was spent on payroll. That's what I was told today. We went over it, and she showed me the documentation she had from SBA to her bank.
Interesting, because I had not seen that anywhere. Antonia, thought?
I know that they're using the 75% of the loan has to be used on payroll. So, but that's all I know. Because one of the questions is the way it reads is it would be a prorate. So 75% does have to be used on payroll.
Before you can get any
Relief.
forgiveness, the way my banker explained it to me today.
That's the way I understand it.
Yeah.
So if we can't get 75% of our employees back, you can't even take a partial piece of this loan.
Or if you can't spend 75% of that money somehow.
No, not somehow, it's got to be on payroll, right?
Right. I mean, on payroll, if you can't dole it out somehow, you can't even start to get say, like I have 53 FTEs, say I get 40 people back and I get a 25% reduction, that pro rata doesn't even start until you spend 75% of your total loan on payroll. That's what I was told.
For all your employees, bonuses for your employees.
Right, all that.
Well, and the other thing is, I can tell you specifically, so you are correct on that, but they're looking at payroll. It's not just your straight wages. There's other stuff that can be included in that under the payroll. So I'm going to pull that definition so I can be clear with you on that.
Right, I think it's everything but FICA.
Yeah, payroll, and this is from the rule, payroll costs consist of compensation to employees in the form of salary, wages, commissions, cash tips, or the equivalent, payment for vacation, parental, family, medical, or sick leave, allowance for separation or dismissal, payment for the provision of employee benefits consisting of group health care coverage, including insurance premiums and retirement, payment of state and local taxes assessed on compensation of employees. That's what they're including in payroll. So, your health insurance, other things you have are included in that number. As qualified payroll costs.
Okay, so I have a question. Is the 75% the number of people that come back from your total FTEs, or is it the amount of payroll that you're spending?
75%, I read that as the amount of payroll that you're spending. So for so 75% would be the equivalent of the 8 weeks of payroll.
And I've been asking my CPAs and attorneys and everybody on our side, and they support exactly what Antonia is saying.
Okay.
That it's about payroll.
Okay.
It's about dollars.
It's about dollars. This 75% is about dollars.
Correct.
About number of people. Okay.
Because no more than 25% under the rule, no more than 25% of the loan forgiveness amount may be attributable to non-payroll costs.
Okay.
Thank you so much, you guys. This is so great. I really appreciate it.
Well, and we appreciate you. And I hate to say we've gone over by 9 minutes and we're losing people. So Antonia and Amelia, thank you so much for everything, for all of your answers. I know this is super helpful to my members. Once again, you guys don't forget, get your own, you have your certain situation, be sure and get your own legal counsel. But Antonia is also here to help. And if you need to call her, every one of our members has a half an hour free, and then it's a discounted rate after that. So thank you all so much for being here. We're going to be on tomorrow. And don't forget, our Wednesday call is about the optics of sanitation. If you're still open, if you're doing takeout and delivery, I want you to be on this call, because you're going to learn whether you can take your employees' temperatures, if you can require them to wear face masks. You're going to learn a lot of stuff just about making your customers feel comfortable that you're doing everything you can to keep them safe and to keep your employees safe. So thank you guys so much. I think that's it. Antonia, do you have parting words?
No, stay full speed ahead. You know, this will work itself out. Thanks, Carol, for having us. Have a good day.
My email address is executive@nmrestaurants.org if you need to email me. Thanks, guys. Bye.